if you build it, they will come. I don't think that's a very good business strategy. You have to build it. They will come if you prepare well and you do all the things that will get them to come to support you. There were definitely some challenges on scaling. We were shipping glass bottles across Canada in the middle of February when it was minus 40. That didn't work out too well. We're taking our product and our brand to the US in a big way. We've done exceptionally well in Canada. So there's lots of good advice out there. But being able to determine what's good advice and what isn't, that's really an important skill for any entrepreneur, I think.
Problems are what? Problems are profits!
Welcome to the Problems or Profits podcast. We have special guest Ted Fleming on today, who is the founder and CEO of Partake Brewing Company. So really excited to have Ted on. And we're going to just get started here. But before we do, I want to talk about what problems or profits means to me. And to me, it really means overcoming any obstacle that's thrown your way. So whatever it is in life, in your health, your wellness, or whatever business strife you're looking to overcome, it's the approach that you take to actually taking that on or not. And in that problems or profits mentality, it's really taking that ownership to overcome whatever you have in front of you and turning it into a success or a profit. So welcome, Ted, to the podcast today. We're really excited to have you because you have just an incredible story. And what we're going to do today is we're just going to start with a few warm-up questions just to get the ball rolling. And then we'll get into some of the more nitty-gritty details here on the podcast today. So Matt, if you want to kick us off with one of our first warm-up questions.
Awesome. Yeah, Ted. So feel free to take this in whatever direction you like, but what's the most expensive thing you've ever broken?
Most expensive thing I've ever broken. Well, if you can break beer, I've done that. Our very first batch of product we ever made commercially was a bit of a screw up. The recipe that we developed was transcribed incorrectly onto a brewer's sheet, and the end product came out not anywhere close to what I was envisioning, what our prototypes were like. Interesting story. We actually have some customers that we put that out to customers on a, if you love hoppy, really hazy beers, this is for you, but this is not sort of what we were intending to give everybody. We had a few people that decided, hey, I'm gonna take that. And strangely enough, they still ask me to this day, when are you gonna bring back what we called Hoppy Accident to your lineup? So that's coming out later this year. But at the time, I felt like I really broke our first batch of beer, and it could have turned out to be quite expensive.
Nice.
That's awesome.
That seems like the perfect name, Hoppy Accident, from making the most of it.
100%. Well, next question that I have here for you is if you had $1 million and only 24 hours, and then that $1 million completely disappears, what would you do with that $1 million?
Oh, wow. That's a tough question. What would I do? I think I would take the time to spend it with my daughters. I have 3 young daughters. I'd take them out and do some special stuff. I'm trying to envision this in a post-COVID world, of course.
Yeah.
Take them out and do some special things that they've been not able to do over the last year. So I think that would be what I'd do.
Nice. And then our final warm-up question here, Ted, is just, why are you you?
Why am I me? Yeah. Well, I think I'm a very entrepreneurial person. I'm creative, but I'm also a bit of an introvert, which you may or may not get through this podcast. But I tend to be a little bit understated, but very competitive and pursue my dreams. And I think that's, a lot of what makes me me.
Nice.
Awesome.
Appreciate that.
Yeah. So wanted to get started here, Ted. And For our audience, I wanted to have you just tell us a little bit about your backstory. So, where did you come from, and what really motivated you to get into the space of non-alcoholic beer and build up this amazing brand, Partake?
Sure. So, the story around Partake kind of goes back to 2005. So at that time, I was early into my engineering career. I was a very competitive athlete playing sports at the professional level, really feeling good about my career and where my life was going. And, late that year, my world was kind of turned upside down. I started to suffer from severe abdominal pains. I lost a lot of weight. I was very fatigued. And after a series of tests, it turned out that I had Crohn's disease. So, with that news came several years of self-doubt, uncertainty, a feeling of being lost in a way in terms of, career and in personal life. And that was a real struggle. So fast forward to 2010, I was hospitalized. I had a severe flare-up of Crohn's disease, and I was in hospital for nearly a week between surgery and recovery. And it was sort of then and there that I had time to reflect, being in hospital, kind of alone, and having some time to say, okay, where's my life going? How am I going to change it? And so, I resolved to kind of take control of my life and my health going forward. So when I got out of hospital, I kind of did the opposite of what most people would do. I had a secure government job with a health plan, and I resigned, and I went out on my own to become an entrepreneur. And to begin with, that was for me. I came from an engineering background, so I began as an consulting engineer. And during that time, I was trying to give up alcohol, kind of be true to some of the promises I'd made myself in hospital. And it was very hard. There weren't any good products available on the non-alc beer side. I was a beer lover, particularly craft beer lover, and so it was very tough. And at that time, few restaurants or bars bothered to stock any, and I was often mocked for even trying to order one. Server might say, why would you order that? We've got water and soda. So it wasn't a very inclusive experience for me. So being the entrepreneur that I am, I started an online store that began importing some more interesting products from Europe. And that was sort of my first foray into the non-alcoholic beer world as an entrepreneur. And this allowed me to test ideas, to listen to customers, learn from mistakes, and find community in non-alcoholic beer. And so from that's where the feedback from our customers started to come in. Can you create a craft or get your hands on a craft non-alcoholic beer? I couldn't source it. And so I decided to tackle it in making our own product. And that's how Partake Brewing was born.
That's an amazing story. I'd love to maybe dissect it a little bit further and just really, what was the timeline there from going from stable job to entrepreneur? Did you sit down and map out your finances, or was this just, I'm going to jump out of the plane and build my wings on the way down? I'd love to hear that, because I know there's a lot of people that have that entrepreneurial spirit or spark, but oftentimes it's hard to find an environment where maybe people are going to support you or be like, yeah, go into it, take that leap of faith. So what did that look like for you, Ted?
Yeah, it was a bit nerve-wracking. Definitely some deep thinking about what that meant to my family. I was married. We had one daughter at the time. I now have three wonderful daughters, but it was definitely a discussion with my family, and having a support network certainly helped. My wife had a stable job and health benefits, and we were lucky enough to have both been early in our careers, pretty good savers, so we had a bit of a cushion to work from. So that gave us the confidence on the financial side. And I think additionally, my wife, her dad was an entrepreneur and grew up with that around her. So I think she was more comfortable with that than maybe other spouses might be without that experience growing up.
Absolutely. Now, how did you go from the initial idea to actually putting this into fruition? Like, you have this idea, you're quitting your job, you're at that stage. Now, how do you actually take it to a real live thing that is moving forward and create that business?
Yeah, so I certainly saw a need in the marketplace. My own experience kind of was that aha moment that no one was really serving this market. No one was serving the community. There were more people with similar challenges that I was experiencing, wanting to have a good non-alcoholic beer alternative, feeling maligned for being in the category, not feeling accepted in social situations because you weren't drinking. So, the low hanging fruit for me was starting that online store. We could source product from local distributors. We could import some from overseas. And that was sort of a low risk way to test the theory around, is there a larger market for this, for a service like this? And then eventually that led to the pivot that became manufacturing our own product and developing our own brand.
And so I guess, throughout building up this entire business, for context, you've been doing this for a while now, right? We were talking back in 2010. 2010 was that kind of inflection point. So how has the business grown? And do you mind maybe exploring some of the challenges that maybe have came along the way?
Yeah. So early on, the online business, it was successful in terms of, just growing fairly quickly in a few years, but I ran into trouble sourcing product. Today there's far more availability in terms of product, in terms of variety. So you're seeing a lot more businesses actually pop up that look like the business I started 7-8 years ago, which is great for our community because it just makes options so much more accessible. So that was a great starting point. It was easy to test. It was easy to learn from that. But there were definitely some challenges on scaling. We were shipping glass bottles across Canada in the middle of February when it was -40. That didn't work out too well. We couldn't reach the US customers due to regulatory reasons and labeling. And so we learned a lot of lessons, which, got me starting to think about, okay, how do we overcome some of these challenges? And, we kind of thought about two potential avenues. One was franchising our business, the e-commerce business, and the other was getting into manufacturing and brand ownership. And we obviously took the latter path.
Awesome. And then so throughout the journey, you've had some opportunities to step onto some decent sized stages and kind of pitch Partake as well. Do you mind just kind of sharing that with the audience?
Sure. So, I've always been pretty active trying to get out and onto the stage. It's funny. I can, as I said, I was an introvert. I find networking in a crowded room difficult, but I can go up on stage and give my spiel to 1,000 people much more easily. It's kind of odd, but so I always sought out entrepreneurial groups, pitch events. It's kind of like baseball. You need to start in the minor leagues and get some at bats under your belt and work your way up. So started with some local events, then regional, national, and eventually ended up on Dragon's Den a few years ago as well, which was a great experience. I highly recommend it to any aspiring entrepreneur out there, but it does take a lot of preparation, and you can see the difference between those who come on prepared and those that don't. And I think it's an important one chance that you don't want to mess up.
Absolutely. Now, you obviously were successful in your pitch on Dragon's Den. So did that have any influence on the direction that you went and building some of those relationships or partnerships?
Yeah, it's funny on the show. I did get a deal on TV, and that was with Manjeet Minhas, who's still on the show. And we had conversations afterwards about potentially working together. And to her credit, she said, I think you can do this yourself. So go do it. And I wasn't sure at the time whether she was just trying to let me down easily or whether she meant that. But anyways, she did me a favor and I think what we've accomplished in the years since is a testament to that.
That's awesome. And then so throughout this journey of like getting on different stages, pitching, also pivoting the business, is this all just school of hard knocks? Were you leaning on your father-in-law? Did you have a mentor throughout this process? What did that look like?
Yeah, early on, it was really trial and error. It was, test something. Does it work out? Does it not? Trying to make those mistakes and learn from them without them being existential. So placing a lot of small bets and seeing what works. And then when we decided to pivot to to our own product, our own brand, Partake, I think we tried to de-risk that by going out to the community that we'd built. We did a Kickstarter campaign. That community was incredibly supportive. They helped us raise $30,000 in a matter of days to fund our first batch, and we were kind of off to the races from there. Notwithstanding that first batch that didn't turn out quite to spec.
Nice. And then so like, how was the Kickstarter process? Was that a whole campaign? Was that something you guys just put up and crossed your fingers? Did you go into it prepared the same way you were for Dragon's Den?
Yeah, there was a lot of research and preparation. So figuring out how to do just a marketing campaign in the 2 months leading up to the actual campaign, getting your community excited about what you're doing, getting them, put on your calendar this day, Partake Kickstarter goes live, and being able to corral your fans and your community to take action. I think there's a lot you can do up front. I think if you just try to put it up there and say, if you build it, they will come. I don't think that's a very good business strategy. You have to build it. They will come if you prepare well and you do all the things that will get them to come to support you. So
yeah, I know once or twice I've looked at like potentially Kickstarter for some options and had one or two friends that their businesses have done successful Kickstarters. And as I did my original due diligence, I was blown away by how serious a lot of these small businesses take their Kickstarter campaigns. So, I can remember reading a few different guides and stuff where people were like, oh, we took an employee and put them full time on communications for our Kickstarter, right? And just all those different aspects. And I think that it can be really easy when you read a headline and it's so-and-so raised X amount of money in one day on Kickstarter. Anyone can go on Kickstarter. It's important to understand there's often a lot of preparation on the front end that gets front loaded that doesn't make it into the headline, doesn't necessarily even make it into the underlying story.
Yeah, absolutely. I think whenever you see cases of success, there's a lot of preparation behind them. People say, you're an overnight success, but there's usually 10 years of toil to get to that point. And I feel like that's true in my case as well.
Absolutely. Now, do you have any kind of building off of the mentorship piece? Do you have any mantras or people who you like idealize that you're really looking to strive towards or follow in their lead, or kind of sayings or things that you really align your values with?
Yeah, I think for us, going back to the preparation piece, there's so many little things that you can do on a day-to-day basis that add up to something big. And I think for me, there's a consistency as well. If you show up every day, put in the reps, do those little things every day, you can do some great things over time. But there's not home runs. People aren't successful because they swing for the fences. You got to think big, of course. That's important, but showing up every day and putting in the work every day, I think is very important to me and to my team.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So there's no silver bullet, is what you're saying.
Not one that I've found. No.
And I'd love to hear what projects or what obstacles, problems are you and your team currently overcoming now? What are you guys working on? What's the next phase of the business look like?
Yeah, so we're taking our product and our brand to the US in a big way. We've done exceptionally well in Canada. Our fans love the variety that we bring to the table, the craft beer styles, the fact we're natural ingredients, And I think really importantly that we're as low as 10 calories a can. So it's a very healthy product offering we're bringing to the table, and it tastes great. We've won the World Beer Award for best non-alcoholic beer. But the U.S. is certainly a big nut to crack. We've got some great early traction there with some retailers, and that's something we're really focused on building over the next few years. One of the challenges to that is we're growing at an exponential rate, and trying to integrate and build a team during COVID where we can't congregate at the office. We have some new employees just out of school, and this is their first work experience, and we're trying to give them as best as an experience as they can have out of the gate. But it certainly there's certainly challenges not being able to do things face to face right now like we'd like to do.
And have you found any ways to navigate that? Because it is difficult onboarding new team members in this environment and getting them, especially virtually, to understand the culture, right? It's one thing when you walk into the office space and everyone's there, high energy or whatever an individual company's culture is, but it can be actually a pretty jarring experience. Some companies that I've seen that seem to have great culture when they were in together, it seems to fall apart the moment that there's this filter of a camera and screen.
Yeah, we were just getting started in terms of an office environment before COVID, so we didn't have a lot of time to develop that. So we didn't have a nucleus of culture at that point. So it's been building on the fly, trying to think outside of the box in terms of just getting people together, whether it's one-on-one. So we have weekly one-on-one coffee breaks with someone else in the organization, team meetings every 2 weeks with sort of big picture updates from all the departments. We try to do special things for people on their birthdays. We have a ongoing, Partake Brewing playlist for the team. So, just trying to keep things fun, try to stay connected, and try to make it not so hierarchical, top down an organization, but make it more like a spider web where everyone's connected and everyone feels like top to bottom. You can reach out and talk to someone because we're all just people at the end of the day, and we're all dealing with this unique situation that is COVID.
I guess one more question I really wanted to explore with you, Ted, is, and kind of going back more to the origin story of Partake, having a serious health diagnosis, serious health problem, it'd be really easy, I think, to find oneself caught up in maybe self-pity or why me, or, the luck of the genetic draw. Did you immediately, is that your engineer brain just immediately going into problem solving mode and being like, one of the problems is I like this thing and it's not necessarily good for me, so I'm just going to solve it? Did that take a period of time to really come to that conclusion? Because again, it's amazing that you were able to take something that a lot of people would see as a problem and harness that towards something good, right? And build a business and a brand and a community around it. Any tips or tricks for people that find themselves in that position, or how did you deal with it?
Yeah, I think for me, it did take several years of exploration. I think, to be honest, I was in denial about my condition for a few years and didn't really accept it as a problem that I would have to deal with. I think acceptance was a big turning point for me once I decided this is something I need to take action around. That I was able to kind of reach in and use the engineering part of my brain and say, okay, this is a problem I've got. How am I going to solve it for me? And then the entrepreneurial part was, okay, if I'm solving it for me and I have this problem, guaranteed there's a lot of other people out there. I didn't know how many, but starting the online store was a relatively low cost way to test that in a real world situation. So, I approach the business on a day-to-day basis as a series of problems to be solved. And, it goes back to what I was saying about, doing a little bit every day. There's steps to solving these bigger problems. And if you map it out and tackle them day in and day out, you're going to, when you look back at the end of the year, you're going to say, wow, I accomplished so much. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, that cumulative effort really goes a long way. And is there anything that, in looking back and kind of reflecting on that journey that you've gone through, Ted, that you would give yourself advice as a younger version of Ted, who maybe could have been more optimal in solving some of those problems?
Yeah, I think thinking big is something I'm continually challenged with. What does big look like? 4 years ago, we've surpassed what big looked like 4 years ago. What does big look like now? We need to adjust and think even bigger. That's important. More recently, I have brought on some mentors to help guide me and hold me accountable as the head of the company. Sometimes you can you can lose your way, I think, in some ways if someone's not holding you to account on a regular basis. So that's been an important element that I've added, and I enjoy. So there's lots of good advice out there, but being able to determine what's good advice and what isn't, that's really an important skill for any entrepreneur, I think.
Yeah, and I think it's difficult too to understand like that filtering system. Being careful about your sources, right? A lot of friends and family may have well-meaning advice, but if they haven't necessarily had a lot of experience being an entrepreneur or trying to problem solve the way you have, again, it can be well-intentioned advice, but maybe not actually going to get us the results that we want or are seeking. So I think it is really important that people focus on that filtering system and then focusing on what's under your control as well as the entrepreneur.
Yeah, for us, like one example was we had people early on that said, "Oh, I used to work in beer, and I know exactly how to build your business." And I think for us, it was a good decision not to take that advice, because we needed to find out what was unique about our customers. And the beer playbook isn't the same as what our playbook is. There are important differences, and having the confidence to understand that is important.
Yeah. So kind of switching gears here, Ted, I'd love to hear, is there currently a problem, an obstacle you're encountering that maybe you're just too busy to solve, right? You've got Partake, you've got this going on, but maybe out the corner of your eye, you're like, if I had all the time in the world, that's a problem I'd maybe like to go solve or turn into a profit center. Because we'd always love to leave the audience as well with maybe some ideas or sparks of inspiration.
Yeah, I think for me, like climate change, environmental improvement is something that's really important to me. We tackle that in some ways through our business with making changes to our packaging, trying to manufacture as close to our consumers as possible, reducing our greenhouse gas emissions from transportation, reducing plastic in our packaging to almost zero at this point. I think there's a lot of opportunity for consumer packaged goods companies to make an impact on the environment, and so if looking at life after Partake for me, potentially, I think that's an area that excites me and something that I'd look to get involved in.
Awesome. Well, again, really appreciate you making the time to jump on the show today, Ted. And if people want to follow along with you or Partake's journey, what are the best ways online to do so?
Sure. So our website is drinkpartake.com, and we're on Instagram and Facebook. I believe Instagram is Partake Brewing, and Facebook is Drink Partake.
Awesome. Again, really appreciate it, and love the fact that you were able to take something that a lot of people would see as a big downside, a big problem, and could easily get caught up in their headspace, and turned into not only something that benefited you, but it's benefiting an entire community. And now you're building a business, employees. It's amazing.
Thank you. I'm grateful that I've been able to do it. I know a lot of people with Crohn's disease have it worse than I do, so I'm grateful that my health has been such that I could pursue this.
Absolutely. Well, thanks again for joining us, Ted, on this episode of the Problems or Profits podcast, hosted by Matt McKeever and myself, Rebecca Lynn Matheson. Really, really grateful to have heard your story and see exactly how you've taken all of these crazy experiences that you've had and been able to whip them into this incredible product and just build a solution out for others to partake in your drinks. So really appreciate that. And thanks again for joining.
Thanks for having me on, guys. Nice to meet you.
Problems are what? Problems are profits!